and welcome to part 2 of the Terraform and ICIC demo. My name is Vic Cross, still. Where we left off at the end of the first video was in this state, where we'd used Packer, talking to the OpenStack compatible APIs of ICIC to create some new base images for us. One customized as an HTTPD, a web server, and the other customized as HA proxy instance for load balancing. The next part of the demo is to progress into using Terraform to actually use those base images that have been created to create some virtual infrastructure that Terraform will then manage. So we've got some configuration files. Terraform's going to communicate with ICIC using those OpenStack compatible APIs again, and we're going to create 4 virtual machines altogether, 3 HTTPD servers and 1 HA proxy. And we're going to use those base images that were created in the first stage of the demo using Packer. So again, like we did with Packer before, Terraform can make use of Ansible to do some post-provisioning customization. We're going to do that to all 4 of these virtual instances. So let's get started. Okay, so I've opened up a new terminal window parallel to the one that I was running before. I'm going to turn things around. Before we showed you the configuration and then ran it, which kind of lengthens the video a little bit. This time I'm going to start the configuration, start the Terraform run, and then while it's running, I'll explain to you what the configuration is actually doing. So that's why I've got a second terminal window here. So yeah, again, just to recap, we've built some base images and we're now going to use Terraform to instantiate those basic images and do some things. So that's where we left off before. We've just switched into the Terraform directory, and I'm going to, again, if we were building this from a completely new installation, we would run Terraform init, and that would make sure that all of the basic requirements for Terraform are there, ready to go. But we've done that already in this case. We're going to go straight to Terraform plan. Now, Terraform plan is going to look at the state of the infrastructure that we're supposed to be managing and compare that state to the configuration file that we have in front of us. And you can see here that there was a bunch of output there. So we're just going to scroll back through that output back to the top. This is Terraform having done its connection to the infrastructure and discovering the state of the infrastructure. It knows that these are all of the things that need to be done to bring the infrastructure into the same state as the configuration file. This is what it means to be infrastructure as code. Now, because there's nothing instantiated at the moment, Terraform knows, well, I've basically got to do everything, right? So lots of green little plus marks to say, here's something new that didn't exist before. So if we're happy with that, and in our case we're going to do Terraform apply. Now, Terraform apply is the way to tell Terraform to go ahead and do what we want. It runs through the plan again, just for belts and braces to make sure that you're absolutely okay. And if you acknowledge, then you type yes. Yes is the only value that will result in anything happening at that point. Now, straight away, Terraform's used the OpenStack compatible APIs to ICIC, and you saw there briefly there was a virtual machine that got created called HA proxy. Now, I've got another tab in my browser window here that is pointing to the IP address and the right location for that statistics interface that we configured in HA proxy. And as you saw, nothing there at the moment because that guest hasn't provisioned yet. So what's the Terraform configuration look like? Terraform can be configured in a modular way. So I've got a module here that defines the HTTPD guests that I'm going to provision, and I've got a module that defines the HA proxy guests that I'm going to provision. Very, very similar at the top level. I think the only difference in the entire configuration is the name of the images that I'm going to instantiate, and I think later on when I get to the HA proxy part, I configure a particular IP address in the HA proxy virtual machine. We'll look at that a little bit later. The other thing that I've done in the HTTPD guests here is I've got at the bottom line of the HTTPD guests module, I've got a dependency. Now in Terraform, you can configure dependencies between different parts of the infrastructure that you manage. For demonstration purposes, what I've done is I've made the provision of the HTTPD guests dependent upon the provisioning of the HA proxy guests. So that's why in our virtual machines tab over here, we've got the HA proxy virtual machine being configured first before the HTTPD ones get created. I just paused the video in the background there to be able to talk through that. So here is here are the variables that we've defined, and this is the main part of what we've got in the variables is the setting of the virtual machines that I want each of these modules to actually instantiate. So in the module definition, there was a for each keyword that said for each of the values that's contained in this variable, do this provisioning task, basically. So here is the definition of those variables. So for the HTTPDs, I've got a VM1, VM2, and a VM3, and I'm giving each of them a name. In the HA proxy case, I'm just configuring one. It's going to be called VM1, and it's going to have a particular virtual machine name. Right? So that's setting up the provisioning of the virtual machines. When we actually look at the modules, there's separate configuration file for each of these modules. So if we look at the Terraform configuration for the HA proxy image, I'm just going to pause again. So the here is where I'm managing version control, and I'm kind of cheating a little bit at the moment because I've turned off the version control. Here I'm setting, instead of specifying the exact name of the image that I want Terraform to use, which is exactly what you'd do if you had tight version control, right? You'd actually be using the image name down to its revision number or its build timestamp or whatever process you use for your version control. Here I'm just saying I want an image that has HA proxy in its name, but just give me the most recent one. So you can do that too, basically. And that's the example. It just makes the coding a little bit easier for the demo. So version control is still possible. I'm just sidestepping it here. Now the other thing that's different about the HA proxy one, as I think I mentioned earlier, is that I'm specifying the fixed IP address for HA proxy, and that's kind of consistent with what you would probably do in real life, right? Because your HA proxy, that's your load balancer, you're going to want to put that into DNS, right? Now maybe you get to the point where you have Terraform or Ansible or something like that actually managing the DNS for you, right? But in my situation, I don't. So I want my HA proxy instance to have a fixed IP address that I can put in wherever else that needs. Mainly it's just the browser tab that I had open before, right? But we'll see a little bit later an example when I get to the HTTPD guests. We'll see how we can actually take details like IP addresses and actually make those IP addresses available for use in other parts of our automation. Okay, so we also have, and again this is for demo purposes, right? I've got a static wait basically before other parts of the provisioning can take place. So I'm running this remote exec, and the remote exec needs the definition of an SSH connection to be able to run. So here's our variables file, very similar to what we saw with Packer when we were configuring the the creation of the images. And you can see at the bottom here, I've got the specification of the fixed IP address that we've got. Now, those of you who know iTerm2, you've probably seen that blinking blue light on the other window. You go, Vic, there's something happening in the other screen. Well, here it is. Yeah, it's actually happened. The HA proxy instance has configured OpenStack. Again, ICIC through the APIs has reported that it's provisioned. It's not yet customized though, so Cloud Init and all of those fancy things are still running inside the virtual machine to configure the IP address. So this is that remote exec that I just mentioned previously. This is that actually running at this point. So it's waiting to be able to configure or to connect to this virtual machine using SSH, waiting to be able to do that, and right on cue, it has now been able to connect. So now the next part, basically at that point, the HA proxy instance is configured. So now that dependency has been resolved, and now the HTTPD virtual machines can kick off and provision. And again, in our ICIC window, that's exactly what's happened. So we've got the HTTPD virtual machines that are being created now as well. So they're starting up over there. And we can see that in our terminal window, there's still the messages coming out. So back over here, now that the HTTPD side of things is actually provisioning, let's have a look at that part of the configuration now. So the module that defines the HTTPD guests, very, very similar to the previous one for HA proxy. Couple of details again, that we do not have the specification of the static IP address. We're letting ICIC assign IP addresses to these HTTPD guests from the IP address pool. And then we're going to also do a post-provisioning Ansible run. Remember earlier I said that when I created the HTTPD image, that I set up the Apache web server to not be started when the guest is provisioned. And here, this is, I did that for an example, right? I said I'd come back to it. So I'm running a playbook here post-provision that actually goes and talks to that guest, and all it's going to do is just start up HTTPD, right? So it's just for, again, just for demo. To demonstrate that we can do customization not only at the time that we create the image using Packer, but we can also do customization at provisioning time with Terraform. Now, another really important aspect of using Terraform to provision infrastructure is this idea of generating outputs. Terraform takes responsibility in and of itself for the virtual infrastructure that it manages. But it recognizes that sometimes there's other parts of your infrastructure that need to know information about what Terraform is managing. And that information is handled by this concept of outputs. And looks like I'm just going to have to spin backwards a little bit just to go back to that file. Yeah, here we are. So we define outputs in Terraform to give Terraform the guidance that, some of this information that you're managing internally, we do need to expose it. So here in our HTTPD module, I'm exposing the details of the virtual machines that have been created as outputs. And I do that because I need to know their IP address. I need to know their IP address so that I can configure HA proxy correctly. So that's a really cool thing that, like I said, Terraform manages all of the information internally, but it still can expose certain pieces of the managed information. So where are we up to now? What else are we looking at? Going to show you the Ansible playbook All right. Remember I said that there's an Ansible that's going to run. So this one's pretty straightforward. It's just I forgot the name of it when I did the desktop recording. Right, this is pretty straightforward. It's just go ahead and start Apache. Right, that's all we're going to do. And again, that's just for demo purposes. Right. There is one other playbook which I've got running separately at the moment, and this is the playbook that I'm going to run that will actually do the configuration of HAProxy. Right. So from HAProxy, and we'll see this when we get to this stage of the demo, I'm going to go ahead and update the firewall configuration to having configured HAProxy to service HTTP requests. I'm going to open the firewall, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update the configuration, and I'm going to put into the HAProxy configuration file the right settings, the right configuration to have my 3 HTTPD instances work as a backend that's front-ended by my my HAProxy instance. So I set up that configuration. Firstly, I read in a template file, and then I write the results of that templating out to my HAProxy configuration file. Then I open the firewall and then restart HAProxy. And then I'm just going to show you the actual template file. If you know Ginger, if you've worked with Ansible before, you'll probably recognize what this looks like. It's basically just the fragment of the HAProxy configuration file with the right templating variables, the right Ginger variables to be able to pull the information out of the outputs that I pass in from Terraform and actually write them into the HAProxy configuration. So this is the linkage between. Oh, and the other cool thing that, well, I think it's cool, the other trick basically that I'm doing is what I've highlighted here, just to prove again that this is the HAProxy is actually talking to the configuration that I've generated, the infrastructure that I've generated. I'm using that PHP info script, which I injected into the HTTPD images. I'm using that as the health check in HAProxy. So, yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think it's kind of cool, right? If they come up green in HAProxy, it means that the health check is satisfied, and the health check is actually hitting the PHP info script that we injected in. So, yeah. Well, let's see what we get. So, yeah, PHP info, it's like a double check. They come up green because there's HTTPD, but they really come up green because we're actually hitting the valid PHP info script. All right, so let's move on. We've still got our virtual machines provisioning over here, our HTTPD virtual machines. One is active, right? HTTPD2. Oh, it's really hard to say. It's done. It's ready to go. Well, almost ready. It hasn't quite finished. Yeah, if we refresh our HAProxy tab, right, we can see we've got the statistics page. And of course we have, because our HAProxy instance has been sitting there waiting for us. But the only thing that's configured in HAProxy at the moment is the statistics page. So I refreshed that a few times, and the byte counts have increased, right, as we'd expect. But once all of our HTTPD guests have finished provisioning and everything is finished, then we'll be able to do the final step of doing the HAProxy Ansible configuration, and then we'll have the real test, the real acid test, if you like. again, takes a little while, but when we think about what's happening, how long have I been talking? Maybe 10 minutes or so, maybe a little longer. In that length of time, we're having 3 virtual machines provisioned from a base image that didn't exist half an hour ago, and automatically provisioned with a valid IP address for the network that they're in, automatically having the right service activated on that system and ready to go. And Terraform says it's done. HA proxy, well, yeah, we know that that's not going to do anything yet because we haven't run our Ansible playbook to configure HA proxy yet. But here you can see this is that output concept that I was talking about earlier. So Terraform, once it's finished the apply, reports this is the information that I'm making externally available about this environment. And you can see that the key details there are the IP address for each of these HA, it tells us the IP address for the HA proxy instance, but it also tells us the IP addresses for the HTTPDs. And this is the output that I parse to pass into Ansible. So here's my Ansible command line, and I'm including the Terraform output in JSON format into the Terraform, from Terraform into the Ansible playbook run. So when I run that, all of the information, all of that Terraform output information is available. The playbook has run, and when HA proxy refreshes, magic. Hey presto. So there you have it. So there's our infrastructure provisioned, right? So if I'm now going in another browser tab, I'm going to go to the IP address of HA proxy, and I'm going to run the PHP info using the IP address of HA proxy. And this is going to, well, I get a PHP info screen, but this one's coming from HTTPD2, right? So if we come back to HA proxy, we can see that we've had traffic against the HTTPD2 backend. So if I refresh that now, okay, that one came from 3, that one came from 1, number 2 again, number 3, number 1, and if we jump back to the statistics, yes, yep, they're all rotating, all incrementing as we expect. Okay, so wonderful. So there's an example of the provisioning, and I'm just going to run Terraform plan again. Nothing's changed in the environment, so this is Terraform now knows that it does that check again, just like it did before we actually ran the apply, but it can see that all of the infrastructure that it has been given to manage, or that it has been given the task of managing, is provisioned, and the state of everything, IP addresses, base image names, all of that sort of thing, matches the state that Terraform knows it should be. Right? So no changes. Your infrastructure matches your configuration, so that's good. So the last thing that I'm going to do is show you cleaning up, right? So Terraform, again, has complete management over the infrastructure that you're provisioning using that infrastructure as code capability. So once you're done with it, to get rid of it is just as simple as telling Terraform to destroy what it's created. So again, it tells you what it's going to do. You acknowledge that with replying yes, and back in our ICIC interface, because the HA proxy, well, there we go. We can see that already the HTTPD guests have been asked to shut down. And that's because, again, that dependency of the HA proxy being dependent on the HTTPDs. Did I say that right? Yes, I think I did. So when it's time to destroy, it will get rid of the HTTPDs first, right? So we can see that shutting down and deleting the HTTPDs first, and that's why they disappeared from HA proxy. And then once that's done, once the HTTPD guests have been cleaned up, then we come back and it will clean up the HA proxy, and then we'll see that one go dark. So yeah, so that's in fact that's already happened. You can see we're hovering over the no response from that statistics page anymore, and the messages are indeed saying that we've moved on to cleaning up the HA proxy guest as well. It's a lot quicker to clean things up than it was to create things. I don't know, maybe there's a message in that for all of us. What? So that's basically our demo, right? And there's our final message from Terraform there to say that the resources are destroyed. And we can see back in our ICIC window, we can see that our images are all still there. We haven't cleaned up anything that Packer created. Terraform is just cleaning up what it was managing. And we're back to the state that we were when we started. All of those virtual machines that we've instantiated, they're all gone. And there's our HA proxy statistics window. It's no longer replying. So that's our demo. I hope you found that interesting. This is some capability that's available now, and I hope you found it interesting, and perhaps I'll see you in the next video.